Welcome into an all-new episode of Panthers on Tap. I'm Curtis Rauen, joined by Bryson, Karbley, Ricky Raines, coming to you guys on a Monday night this week for a special edition. We got a great guest coming on a little bit later, Mike Kaye from the Charlotte Observer, so stick around for that. Should be coming around 9:30-ish, so stick around. We got a lot on tap for you guys this evening. But first, I want to start. Bryson, welcome back. It's good to see you. I'm glad your wife is recovering and in good spirits. And we both, and a lot of us on Panthers Twitter, have been praying for you guys this whole time and your family. And we are very, very happy that she is on the road to recovery. So it's good to see you. And I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Curtis. I'll try to talk about it without getting emotional, but yeah, you guys, everybody that on Twitter, that follow us, that follow my account, you two, Ricky and Curtis, have been extremely supportive throughout this whole process. It was a scary week for my family, and my wife in particular. I won't get into the details, but her life was at risk, and if you believe in God or you don't, or whatever you believe in, definitely came to our aid during this time, and she is okay. She is going to be fine. Our future of hopefully having a family is still on track, and everything's looking good. So I'm happy to be here. It's a relief, being able to drink beer with the boys and putting all that in the past and moving forward with positivity. Just happy to be here, man. And like I said, you two have been super supportive, and everyone on Twitter. I mean, the amount of comments and DMs and everything I received throughout everything when people didn't even know exactly what was going on, but just people like I've never even met in real life that are just DMing me and like, hey, if you want my number, like here's my number, call me and talk to me. Like if you need help with anything, like people not even know where I live, but like I'll come like walk your dogs, or I'll do whatever you need to do. Like it was so awesome, dude. Like the community, like we go back and forth a lot with our sports takes and who we want the Panthers to sign and who we don't, and things like that. But when it comes down to it, like there's a lot of like good-hearted human beings that are in this community, and they showed during this time for me. So very appreciative of that, and I'm so happy to be back with you guys and everything be okay. So yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Hell yeah, man! Glad to have you back. Don't need to get emotional about it anymore. I'm sure you've had that emotional roller coaster plenty of times.
Yeah.
But I absolutely am happy to have you here and drinking beers with you, and it be a positive, happy drinking situation for us. And we get to talk Panthers football again, man. That's always a fun thing, and it's a good decluttering of the mind. So, man, I'm just very happy that you're here and that your wife is doing well. Continued best thoughts, wishes, and prayers to you guys and your family.
Let's start with what we're drinking. We'll start off. Ricky, you were dabbling with some green dye.
Yeah, man, I'm trying really hard to be festive because I don't know if you guys saw earlier. I completely forgot that today was St. Patrick's Day. I was sitting here working and doing all this stuff, and I went to go pick up my kid, and I'm notorious for just wearing a black t-shirt and black shorts. It's like I'm going to the fucking Oscars every single day when I go pick my kid up. But I'm wearing all black. I got a hat that has an orange horse on it. And this kid is up in this tree, and I walk past him, and I swear to, like, I hadn't taken a step past this little dude, and he just jumps down and pinches my arm. And he's like, "That's what you get." And I was like, "Get for what, bro?" And he's like, "It's St. Patrick's Day." And oh man, so I'm not gonna make that mistake again. I wore my Charlotte Hornets colorway of the Panthers here, so I tried to get a little bit of green. It's a little more teal, but then Curtis, I grabbed some green food dye out of the cabinet and tried to dye my IPA. So it is relatively green, right? Like it's kind of pukey green, but it's green.
Yeah, that works.
There's some chunks of food dye at the bottom, but it'll work, man. I'm going to drink it anyways. This is the Resident Culture Disco Baby IPA from here in Charlotte. Nice little beer. It's about 6.5%, 3 different kinds of hops. Just a nice beer, man. And I wanted to drink something a little bit more than a garbage beer for Bryson's return here to Panthers on Tap.
Bryson, what do you got?
Yeah, I got 2 different beers tonight. Like I've told you guys multiple times, I am like divvying my way through different juicy IPAs, and the one I have tonight is Deep River Juicy Rapids. It's from a brewery over here in Clayton, close to where I live. Very, very good. I don't think I've found a juicy that I don't like so far. I feel like they're all kind of similar, but just just a solid flavor. And then the other beer I have, it's in the cooler right now, but it's just the Carolina Brewery. I think it's called a Blue Kolsch. It's pretty common Kolsch beer in the Carolinas. I had it last night at dinner at Bomba Taco, or I think that was the name of it, Bomba Taco. And I was like, damn, that was really good. So I got some tonight for the show. So that is what I'm sipping on. Curtis, what do you have?
Yeah, I got Old Reliable here. Budweiser.
Oh, gosh.
I had several green beers this weekend, so I dabbled in that a little bit. But and I was considering the color dye, and then I'm like, nah, I got too much shit going on. I don't got time for this.
Yeah. Smart decision, by the way. It's completely
I appreciate
unnecessary.
Ricky at least having it. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I just want to kind of run through some chat here quick before we get started. The Ricky Raines' mom, always love having her. Appreciate her support.
Thank you, Miss Raines.
People.
Yes, everyone is tuning in here. I'm just going to kind of rip through these as we go.
Hey, that was my buddy, BS English. That's Brian. Funny story about him is I met him a long time ago when I was like in Latin friend, and then just stay connected with him through the years, like playing Call of Duty. And then we went up to New York City, which is the area that he lives, and met him in person a couple of years ago, and we've just stayed connected. So I appreciate him tuning in, man. Good to see you in here, Brian.
So Keaton, I believe Keaton's been on a couple of times with us. Jared, he's always
what's up, man?
A returner. It's always good to see him in here. Zach, he's been on. C3 Pickle, Panther Bow, man. We always throw Panther Bow.
I'll tell you what, man. This was the guy that I first thought of when we started talking about doing tonight's episode. We were like, hey, what do you guys think? Can we do a Monday night? I swear to you, Panther Bow, my very first thought was like, dude, we are going to mess Panther Bow up so badly. Because last time when we did it on a Thursday, he was there and he thought it was a Wednesday. Then we did it on a Wednesday and he was late. Now we're doing it on a Monday. This poor dude is in Texas and he's like, what is wrong with these fucking North Carolinians?
Keaton, he's tuning in from Fairbanks, Alaska. That's pretty cool. I like to hear that. Jared said his beverage is water. Stay fluid, my friends.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
And here we go. One of my favorite posts of the night. First time listener here. I love to hear that, Mitch Clark.
Let's go, Mitch.
#, keep pounding. We appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, please, Mitch, hit that subscribe button on YouTube for us. We would appreciate it. But yeah, guys, we do have Mike Kaye coming on in a little bit, 15 minutes or so. But we got some things to discuss here amongst ourselves. There's some things that have happened since last week. I know the tail end of the week was pretty quiet for Carolina in the free agency market, but yes, we're going to dabble with this. I know this is a Panthers show, but there was always this rumor out there, and I'm going to call it a rumor because I never believed it. And that was T. Higgins with the potential tie to Carolina. So him and Jamar Chase locked up long-term deals. We talk about Alex, Anthony, Utopia, the Mafia dude from Cheesehead TV, throwing out a bunch of bullshit. But they locked it up last night, and I just wanted to get your guys' take on it. I know, Ricky, we touched on it this past week because the chat was blowing up about it, and they literally wanted the entire show to be us talking about T. Higgins, and I don't know. I just think me and Ricky were like, yeah, we're just going to let this out in the world, let everyone believe what they want to believe. But we just weren't buying it. So I'm going to start with Bryson. Thoughts on this? I feel like this was between the Milton Williams thing and the T. Higgins, like, I don't know what you want to call it on Twitter. It's just been chaos. It's been kind of a disaster, really. Yeah. But thoughts on the T. Higgins stuff, Bryson?
Yeah, I mean, it was upsetting. I think for me personally, when the franchise tag was placed on T. Higgins, I kind of thought in my own mind that really ended any dreams of T. Higgins being traded to any team, much less the Carolina Panthers. I was talking with, somebody I trust, and they were telling me that T. Higgins was not getting traded, and I tried to put, a couple hints out there that this was not the Bengals player that the Carolina Panthers were in contact with them about. And I stand by what I was told in regards to what I'd said a couple weeks ago, that they like Trey Hendrickson and they've been in contact with his camp. But now it looks like the Bengals are going to be able to swing and sign all 3 guys, which is crazy. So yeah, I mean, T. Higgins, it would have been nice. Curtis, you've been like the biggest T. Higgins fan on the planet, and even having that fandom of his, like, you never bought into it. And I was kind of in the same boat of these rumors flying around on Panthers Twitter. It would have been nice, to get Bryce Young that weapon, that true wide receiver 1, but I never really thought it was a realistic possibility, unfortunately. And, there's other routes Carolina can go, whether that's the draft or whatever it may be, other options in free agency. But T. Higgins was a pipe dream, and unfortunately it turned out to be that. And he is not a Carolina Panther, and he probably never will be. So I wish him luck in Cincinnati, but we are the real Queen City in Charlotte. So unfortunately for him, he signed with the Princess City of Cincinnati. If he ever wants to play for the real Queen City, just come on down here and check it out. He's got a pretty damn good quarterback in Cincinnati. I can't say to play with a better quarterback, but to play with another good quarterback in the NFL, and Bryce Young, just come check it out and see what you think, T. Higgins. Maybe one day.
I like seeing Bryson coming back throwing 7 different kinds of smoke here, man. The Princess City. You forgot to mention that they make them eat all their chili on spaghetti like idiots.
Disgusting.
I mean, they just do weird stuff up there, man. But hey, look, here's the thing. We got somebody in the chat that asked us, and actually it was our first-time listener, Mitch Clark. It says, can you confirm if the Utopia dude is legit or is he full of it? I don't know the Utopia account. I've never interacted with them. I don't know them personally. I do know this, man. Regardless of whether they were correct or whether they were wrong, whether they were making it all up, whether they actually got information and it didn't work out to be true, there's ways that you handle things, and there are probably better ways to handle it than what Utopia did. They have admitted to that. But also, man, it's spreading information, whether it's misinformation or not. Don't threaten the kid with violence. Don't tell him to kill himself or any stupid thing like that. Like, let's don't be that kind of fan base that takes a sport issue and turns it into some sort of like cyber bullying, right? You could sit there and say, hey, dude, that was dumb as hell. Like, why were you making that up? Or say that you don't believe him. That's cool. It's fine, man. He subjected himself to that. But let's leave it there. If he is legitimate and he's trying to make a career out of it, hopefully he learned something here. If he's not and he was looking for some clout and he was trying to give out $1 subscriptions or whatever the case may be, I hope that he got at least 5 or 6 of them so he can get himself a nice hot meal from it. Sorry.
I don't even mean to laugh. Damn it. I didn't even want to touch that comment, to be honest with you. I don't know Utopia personally. I'm not gonna dive in and pick apart someone's sources, whatever they want to put out there. It's their account. More power to them. I didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. That was just me. I let that get, put out to the masses and whoever wanted to run with it could run with it. I decided not to touch it. I just like to call them out when the stuff was starting to head towards T. Higgins because I thought it was fun and let's play. Let's have a little bit of fun with it.
And you know what? With Alex, man, like that's one of our buddies. That's a guy that I used to co-host a show with. Like I know Alex personally. I've had conversations with him about the information that he had received or hadn't received, whatever anyone wants to believe. I know the conversations I had with Alex. I am sure that he absolutely trusted the source that gave him the information. Like I have no doubt in my mind. That doesn't always mean that information is going to turn out the way that you hope it's going to, or the way that maybe some of the tweeting or wording alludes to it going to work out. It is what it is, man. Like, but now that T. Higgins is a Bengal, now that Jamar Chase is locked up, all these things, I want to move on from the trade stuff. I honest to God, just want to move on from the trade stuff. Let's get ridiculous about the draft because at least that's still on the board. We can talk about making 14 trades like it's a PFF simulator or something like that, right? Like, I don't care if we want to talk about ridiculous things, but I move on from all of the rumors about trades and things.
Well, we're not done with the trade shit because people want to talk about it.
Damn it, Curtis.
But I do want to mention this before we get into that. And that was something that is it showing up? Yeah, it is here. Okay. So I'm kind of a nerd and I wanted to go back after like the first week of free agency and listen to Dan and Dave pretty much on Media Row across the board, most of all their interviews, and just see how what they said end up with their moves in free agency and then see if I can find little things here and there I think that could hint to other things later on. So I did that over the on Sunday, I think it was, and I pulled a couple of clips that I just thought were interesting, that I don't know got too much attention, or maybe it did at the time and I just totally forgot about it. But Dave Canales, he was asked on different platforms, both at the Combine like podium, and then he was asked, I believe it was by Pro Football Talk. Is that the Mike Florio show? Yeah, PFT, right? Pro Football Talk. Is that what it is? Yeah.
Yes.
So what I came away with it, he said, adding skill players around Bryce is a priority, but it's not priority one. He specifically mentioned the defense, obviously, as being priority one, and fixing how they defend against the run, which was massive last year and historically bad numbers. And then he kind of added on later that let's get some touchdown makers and continue to add talent to this group. He was also specifically asked by Zetlow of the Charlotte Observer about, do you think that the Panthers, it's a priority to add a wide receiver one after what happened with Deontay Johnson last year? And I can't remember his exact quote, but it was very similar along the lines of like, yeah, I think we need to add playmakers, and we need to add at all positions and challenge positions through either free agency, the draft, or trades. So just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on these comments. And do you think this should be that priority now based of what you saw in free agency in week one? And whoever wants to start.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I think the messaging has been pretty clear from Dan Morgan and Dave Canales, and what happened through the first week of free agency, lent to that, with them addressing that defensive line and improving the run defense. And that was priority one. And I think, with the comment they have on the screen from Dave Canales, he was telling the truth. It is a priority, but it wasn't priority one. And they've addressed somewhat that main priority in improving that defense that was historically bad last season. So I think, in my opinion, we all know I've been on the get playmakers on the offense for Bryce Young train. And I think it's time to add that dynamic piece to that offense. But maybe I'm holding out hope that, that first round pick, number 8, whatever they do with it, trade down, trade up, whatever happens, they go that route and get that weapon for Bryce, because there's not a lot left in free agency, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot left via trade. I put out some stuff about Elijah Moore. Like he could be like a decent piece on the team, but he's not a wide receiver one. I think he could add some value to punt return and kick return, and he's still out there, and a young guy that came out highly touted second round pick out of Ole Miss in I think 2021. So a player that could add something there to the offense that at least puts a solid floor to that wide receiver room that currently they don't have, because the tweet you put out, Curtis, with the current wide receivers, people thought you were making up names to add to that room, and unfortunately, that's the truth. Curtis was not lying in that tweet. Yeah. So yeah, I think with the additions they've made on defense as of now, making that a priority, the priority number one to that defensive line, I think it's time to look at what's out there currently. And maybe the plan is to go into day one of the NFL draft and address it and get that weapon, whether that's a tight end or whether that's a wide receiver for Bryce Young. But I think rolling into next season with the same offense plus Rico Dowdle, a top 500 running back in the NFL, I think is a mistake. Adam Thielen's not getting any younger. I know his play hasn't necessarily dropped off, but we all know he's not a burner. They don't really have that deep threat that really scares defenses. And yeah, Bryce Young showed improvement with those wide receivers. And a lot of the arguments that I see on Twitter is that, Bryce showed he can play with these mid wide receivers and this mid offense. Like, he showed potential. And like in my mind, I'm like, but what can he do with legitimate, like, star talent in the NFL at the wide receiver position or at the tight end position? Like, the limit is the sky, or like Michael Jordan says, the limit is the ceiling. So, I think that should be our priority. If I was running this team, it would have been a little different, I think, going into this offseason. But I'm not mad at them addressing the defense. We all know historically bad, like legitimately the worst ever in the NFL. So to allow 3,000 rushing yards, I think to just spend all your money on the defensive line like they did last season on the offensive line wasn't a bad route to go. They've had a clear vision. They've been on the same page. And I think, let's see how it works out. I'm definitely giving them grace on this.
Before Ricky goes here, I just want to get Bryson's take on free agency quick. Your favorite signing of last week, since we didn't have you on last week, what was your favorite signing of the free agent class that they brought in?
Yeah, Curtis, I know you gave the pronunciation of his name during the show last week. I was watching in the emergency room. That's how much of a dedicated fan I am. Trayvon Morrig.
Marrig.
Okay.
Marrig. It looks Morrig.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's definitely my favorite. I know Ricky mentioned him a couple weeks ago as his, good fit for Carolina. And I was kind of more on the Javon Holland train, but after the signing, I went back and watched some. I wouldn't say tape, but highlight reels and things like that from his time in Las Vegas, and I like what he brings to that defense, man. We haven't had that back there with a safety that's not afraid to get involved in run defense and attitude, man, just attitude, and I like that. He got paid like the best safety in free agency, and I think he was the best safety in free agency. So he was my favorite so far.
All right, Ricky, while we're talking wide receivers, you can touch on Canales' comments if you want, but sure. I saw this come up today. Amari Cooper, thoughts on adding him as a free agent? Because it sounds like they're probably still going to add at least someone in that room, I would think, before the draft. But what are your thoughts on him as a potential target?
Yeah, I got no problem with Amari Cooper. I mean, Amari Cooper offers you a winner on the outside. He can play. I mean, technically, you could have him as your X if you want to. I don't think that's where he's best suited. I think he's more of a Z. But, I mean, he has an outside skill set. He could beat man coverage. He's got decent hands. He's had some drop issues in the past, but he's also had really tremendous seasons where he's been a sure-handed receiver. I don't think he's an ultra-dynamic after-the-catch type of guy. I still think that he's almost like a Coker, Thielen adjacent as far as like athleticism and what they're able to do with the ball. But that's not a bad thing either because Bryce Young has a nice rapport with those kinds of receivers. So I think that he could absolutely add to that room. Another thing that I'll touch on real quick, and I won't go back to the Canales thing, but I did see chat mentioning some things in here too. Football Hockey Bourbon here says just draft Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State at 110 or 113 and call it a day. Need to fix the defense. I'm going to tell you something right now. I absolutely love Jaden Higgins. I've been high on him. I've been, honking that train horn for a long time for him. But I will also tell you this. If he is there at 110 or 113, the next time we're on here drinking together, I'll eat the glass after I finish this because he's not going to be there in round 4. Jaden Higgins is going to go no later than round 2. You're talking about a 6'4", 220-pound guy that can run routes, create a good amount of separation, and is better with the ball in his hands after the catch. I would love Jaden Higgins here. I think that's a trade back possibility. One other thing I wanted to highlight too is Zach Attack here. This is a hilarious comment, so I just wanted to give him some attention. I think he earned it. I'll make a touchdown in my pants if we pick Tyler Warren. Good for you, Zach. That's a really well done thing right there. James mentions trading back for Matthew Golden. This is the fun part about this draft, fellas, is that like there is this wide variety of opinion when it comes to the offensive skill positions here. Teteroa McMillan is a polarizing prospect on his own who is probably consensus-wise thought to be the first player coming off the board from an offensive standpoint. Maybe you look at Tyler Warren. Maybe you look at even Ashton Genty has gotten some smoke around pick 6. But for the most part, outside of quarterbacks and maybe offensive linemen, this is a skill player that you're looking at. But Matthew Golden, Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka, all of them have vehement support in different little portals, right? So you kind of just have to pick and choose what you like, what skill set fits the best. I think the overall thing for me here is that you have possibilities. It's how much do you want to do it and how much do you want to invest in it? Because Bryson pointed it out. We're talking about the historic worst defense. They're going to want to bring a young player in on this defense. They have made a point of emphasis with all these free agent signings to bring in youth. I would love to ask Mike Kaye later tonight when he joins the show some about these free agents that are remaining on the market, right? I'd like to ask him about the wide receivers that are still available. a lot of the ones that have connections with the Carolina Panthers or supposedly would fit well are higher in age, guys. And what they are prioritizing right now is getting younger. Now, maybe not at the punter position, right? They still want to make sure that still checks the AARP box to get them Social Security benefits if we still have that here in this country. But everything else, they're looking around and they're saying, how do we get younger and lower that age limit that looks so awful on these, Bleacher Report articles? So they're doing what they can. I don't see them being super interested in guys Tyler Lockett fits, and he has to work with Canales, but he's going to be almost 33 years old when he starts the season. Is that what they're trying to do with this room?
Sign him, no, man.
And they might, because it's also a proven receiver. It's a proven receiver too, man. Dude, we've got 3 NFL receivers on this roster, and one of them is coming off foot surgery, and he dropped a shit ton of balls last year. We got to have a little bit more to that room. So
all right, let's talk about a guy who's not on the roster that Ricky didn't want to talk about trades, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, but folks want us to talk about it. So Diana Rossini, a couple of weeks ago, I think, had posted on The Athletic that teams have expressed interest in trading for San Francisco 49ers wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk. That has resurfaced now that T. Higgins is out of the picture for a lot of folks. I tweeted this out today because I think Ricky and I had talked about this last week. I have a hard time believing they would want to go after a guy who had some issues with Shanahan after they signed him to a long-term deal. I posted the article, some snippets that The Athletic did in a really deep dive into the San Francisco cap. I don't even know what you want to call it, where they literally had to cut half the team because it's just basically a restart for them. And I cannot see that happening. I seriously think the trade stuff, and I get they have cap space, and that may people think, well, maybe they're working for some sort of big trade. I don't buy it. I think they're just trying to be smart with their money, to be totally honest with you. And I can't see the Brandon Aiyuk happening. What I like him in Carolina, yeah, I think he would provide an upgrade to that room without a doubt. But I think this is another long shot, and folks are they're thirsty for another wide receiver, and they're going to try to, find any single tie to bring one here. But thoughts from you guys. Bryson, what are your thoughts on Aiyuk? Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think it's a pipe dream?
Pipe dream. Once again, I think I agree with you, Curtis. Aiyuk would add to this wide receiver room. He would come in and immediately be the best one in the group. But I also think there is some hesitancy there with players in regards to maybe not the best in the locker room with relationships with the coaches and teammates, especially coming off last season with Deontay Johnson, the fiasco with him. Personally, I wouldn't hold that in abeyance to adding a player the next season. Different people, different situations, but I do think the front office is worried that situation could play out again, and that would not be good, especially trading for Aiyuk and probably having to give up a decent amount to get him. He is a very good receiver that's recently, signed an extension in San Francisco and got paid. So I don't think it's a realistic possibility in Carolina. I wouldn't hold my breath. I think it's another T. Higgins situation, and I think Carolina fans are just trying to grasp at straws, and I completely understand because this wide receiver room needs it. Whoever's available, we want the Panthers to be involved in possibly trading for him, or via trades before the season starts. So I think if I had to, give it a percent chance that Brandon Aiyuk is a Carolina Panther for the upcoming season, I don't know. I'm 5% is where I'm at right now, because it's just doesn't feel like it's a realistic option for Carolina at this point.
All right, before we got Mike coming in here shortly, I just want to end this conversation right here. In this article, to be precise, Aiyuk's 4-year, $120 million extension began aging poorly. Who does this sound like to you? For 4 weeks after the player put pen to ink, he threw a practice field tantrum upon being told by Shanahan to change from red to black mesh shorts. It's not happening, folks.
I can tell you who it doesn't sound like. It doesn't sound like a Panther.
Sounds like Deontay Johnson. All right, on that note, let's bring in the Mike Kaye from the Charlotte Observer, Panthers beat writer. We do thank him so much for coming on. If I can figure this damn thing out. Here he is. Mike, good to see you.
Hey, how's it going? Oh, I thought there was more to that. You kind of like.
No, I was gonna ask you about your hotel, but then I didn't want to give out your location or where the hell you were.
Maybe
I'm like, I'm gonna shut up.
Yeah, we've got a surprise coming tomorrow. I mean, it's not like a big one, but it'll be good for the coverage and good for the base. The way this light's working out, it's making it look like I'm balding, and it's really kind of unflattering, which I'm not. It's just the way that the hair thing looks. Anyway, enough about me. How you guys doing?
We're good, man. We're good. We're super glad to have you back on. It's been too long, dude. But yeah, man, just excited to talk Panthers football with you.
Yeah, no, look, you guys know how I feel about the importance of what you guys do for this fan base, and how a lot of people in this fan base have gravitated towards, the vlogging sphere and doing video and breaking down stuff. I think there's like a rich amount of talent in this fan base as far as commentary goes. And so I enjoy talking ball with you guys. I'm glad Ricky's here this time.
Yeah.
That's a new development, huh? Yeah. The last time it was just you and I on the Bow Body show. I had a whole lot less stuff on the wall, and we sat there about 9 o'clock in the morning drinking coffee, talking about free agency. I think even back then, I think we were talking about Terrace Marshall if he would come back. And now maybe we'll ask you about Devin Tompkins. I mean, we're really up in the bar, right?
Sometimes you got to live a little, as I always say.
That's right, man. Nice to see you, by the way, Mike. All right, Curtis, why don't you start us off here? Because I know that you came up with some good questions. I know we all have some questions, but Curtis, you kind of facilitated this thing tonight. So why don't you go ahead and kick us off, man?
Yeah, Mike, I want to start with something you had in your newsletter and talk about and discuss the Milton Williams debacle. That's what we want to call it. That was one of the things you pointed out in your article. So what did you think of that, the fallout from that? And do you think the Panthers panicked and overpaid Tershawn Wharton?
Well, first off, I don't think it was a debacle. I think there was some overzealous reporting that kind of led to a situation looking different than it actually was. I'm under the impression they were just negotiating. I don't think that there was just based on my impression that there was a close to finalization when it was reported that there was close to finalization. I mean, I think the Patriots made it very clear that they were going to write a blank check. And listen, I covered the Eagles. I covered Milton Williams' rookie year when people weren't sure what he was going to be. The guy's played 48% or less percentage of the snaps on defense his entire career, has been surrounded by all these guys. I was also the guy, if you guys remember, was beating the drum for them to sign him. He would have been a massive upgrade, but I think you also have to keep into context, $104 million is more than what Derek Brown got. And before Derek Brown was injured, he was one of the true workhorse defensive linemen, in the league. Also an elite run defender in a lot of ways. And so I think, if you're going to walk Milton Williams into a room that has JC Horn and Derek Brown, he's making more than both, and making more than Robert Hunt, and making more than Chuba Hubbard, like all your pillared players, when he's been a rotational player for most of his career, I think that would have sent the wrong message. But you brought up the newsletter, and I'm glad you did, because I want to have some fun here, because I figured we were going to get to this at some point. And I just think, when you look at the 104 thing, I've seen the panic move stuff. Listen, Milton Williams is exponentially better than Tershawn Wharton. There is no question about that. But guess what? He's paid like a guy who is exponentially better than Tershawn Wharton. Making $26 million a year is exponentially better than making $15 million a year. And oh, by the way the contract's structured with Tershawn Wharton, who I do believe is an overpay. That's not scaling back on the criticism here. I don't think he's worth the $30 million that he's going to get in the first 2 years. He's a rotational pass rusher who's like a good, if you guys are into baseball, I know Curtis is, lefty righty outfielders. So when you're facing a left-handed pitcher, you're going to put the righty in. When you're facing a righty, you're going to put a lefty in. And that old school rotation, I think Bobby Brown's the run defender and Tershawn Wharton is the obvious passing down specialist. But here, let's put this into perspective, that $104 million as I rant here. So in order to get to that, let's say Milton Williams is your salary cap, right? For whatever purposes, for all contracts. So here's what you can get for $104 million or less. You get Trevon Moehrig, Bobby Brown, Rico Dowd, Patrick Jones, Christian Roseboom, Sam Martin, which we will talk about later, I'm sure, and Brady Christensen and Austin Corbett. And that's with all the funny money built into his contracts, all the funny money built into their contracts. I mean, and then you pay a guy less than 50% when he's made. I just don't see that as a panic move. Maybe it's a poor evaluation of the valuation, but I don't see that as a panic move. I think that's going from like guy number one to guy number two, and there's a drop off. I think that's what it is. I mean, I think it was. I also think like some of the reporting on these contracts, and you guys follow me, you guys know how I report contracts. I'm not going to report it at the ceiling first, right? I'm going to report it at the base because that's what actually matters. And I think like a lot of this stuff, like it was reported out there with Wharton, where it was like $54 million, which that's with incentives. Base is 45. Those sound like completely different totals, right, Ricky?
Yeah.
Like,
yep.
So what I would say is I think the rush to conclusion, like I've seen like really talented people that I admire criticize and say these were like, they're overspending and whatever. I mean, Milton Williams has a career high, like 5 sacks and has played 48% of the snaps and is surrounded by Jalen Carter and all these other guys. And you're like, that's not an overpay. Because when I was beating the drum for him, I was like 4 years, 86 makes sense maybe. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like some
perspective changes. Yeah.
Right. And at some point you need to know when to walk away from the table, which is not something that I felt like the previous regime did. And again, there is criticism to be had, and I'm sure we'll get into this, of this free agency class. But I think the panic spectrum, I actually think, if anything, it showed that they stuck to their guns.
Is it better phrasing, Mike, probably to call that more of a contingency move than a panic move of like, hey, look, they knew who Tershawn Wharton was, right? He was on their radar, and he was kind of that, if they try to cross this threshold with us, New England, that is, and they go to this other world of money, we don't want to do that. Like, we want to bring in this interior pass rusher, but we're not willing to sacrifice all of the other things that we have on our docket to do it. So it's more of a backup plan than a panic plan.
Yeah, I think that's the way to look at it. I think like when you look at the real money that's thrown around, the guy who came closest to setting the market of their signings is Trevon Moehrig. That was a guy they really, really wanted. And you know, I had banged the drum for him as well on our podcast, Processing Blue. Pretty good podcast.
It's a very good podcast.
Very good.
And, you know, Alex beat the drum for Bobby Brown. So good on him. Like, there were guys that were like obvious fits for what their weaknesses were. And while, look, Milton Williams would have been huge. I think he would have opened up a ton of opportunities for everybody to eat. I think that's his true value outside of sack numbers. But the truth is he's never been double teamed. Because he's had Jalen Carter or Fletcher Cox or Brandon Graham or Josh Sweat or Hassan Reddick or, you know, what have you around him. And so he's never had to be the guy. I understand why the Patriots overpaid for him, because Jarrell Casey was so important to the Mike Vrabel defense in Tennessee. And if you were going to comp a 3 technique, I get that with Milton Williams. If he was your crown jewel, they also spent on Carlton Davis and Harold Landry. And all those were logical signings. I think for the Panthers, they've made some logical signings too. I think Moehrig, Bobby Brown, they've made this a much better run defense on paper. And Milton Williams wouldn't have helped with that run defense.
Yeah.
So I think what you have to say to yourself is if you want this situational pass rusher who can be moved around the line, you want to run platoons, you still need that element. If you're planning that element, like Ricky said, you have to have somebody who fits that mold. And I guess that's Wharton was like, seemingly the backup plan. I don't know if that was the right. I gave it a C on my grades. I mean, because I think there's upside there, and clearly they know the player because of Brent Tillis. But like of the moves, I was kind of like, okay, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Ricky, you had a free agency question. While let's stick to the free agency conversation. I know you had something you kind of teased before.
Well, yeah, we were talking about wide receivers, Mike. And look, I don't have to tell you, you are on the internet. You cover the team as your profession. You know how much people have talked about T. Higgins. You know how much people have talked about Brandon Aiyuk now is the other name. You know the DK Metcalf situation. The Carolina Panthers fan base, and rightfully so, is hungry for a wide receiver one to find out what Bryce Young can do with an elite talent, a proven NFL talent, if you will.
Sure.
The wide receivers that are left on this market, though, Mike, seem to be like the big name ones and the ones that maybe they have actual direct connections with that you might try to tie those like connections to together. They're older. And the priorities for me, from what I've looked at with the free agency, is this team is very aware of how old they were on paper, and they are not interested in keeping that up. They want to be younger. They want to have upside. They want to find guys that maybe they get in a little bit early. Maybe they throw out a couple of extra dollars, but they are going to get in a little bit early and have them locked up for a couple years and have that trajectory. But Tyler Lockett, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, those are the three like big names, right, that are still left on the wide receiver market. Tyler Lockett was with Dave Canales in Seattle. That is going to be the obvious choice that a lot of people talk about. You mentioned, and I've seen other people mention as well, I think Dave Canales even spoke to it directly. They also have a lot of emphasis on special teams contributions from a lot of these signings. I don't know that any of those three are going to give you special teams. But then you got guys like Devin Duvernay, right? You got Elijah Moore. You got Rondale Moore. David Moore can come back. He was with the Panthers. Then you even got one little wild card at Grant Dubose, right? They played college ball here in Charlotte, 7th round pick in 2023. Maybe that's a guy they explore. Is there anything out there, or have you heard anything or get a feeling that they are absolutely still going to make a move in free agency at the wide receiver? And then could that also have ramifications with the draft?
I don't know if they'll absolutely make a move. My impression was, despite whatever the heck was going on the internet, they were not very much in on T. Higgins. They weren't very much in on DK Metcalf. I'm not saying that they didn't look in on it, but everybody who's a good GM looks in on it. I don't know that there were any offers made. I haven't heard that. I'm just under the impression that that was not something they were gunning for. And so here's what I would say about wide receiver. Study the way the market's going, okay? When a number 2 wide receiver on a non-playoff team is making close to $30 million a year, what does that tell you about the wide receiver market and how this continues to balloon? Or what is it? I came in midway through your Brandon Aiyuk thing. Buyer's remorse. Stephon Diggs has been traded several times. Wide receivers, while they're getting paid more than corners, are also being traded more than any other premium position in the league. And so what I would say is there's this whole concept that came up like 7 years ago when Carson Wentz was in Philadelphia, and everybody made a big deal about, oh, when a guy's on a rookie contract, that's when you attack all these other positions. Yeah, that makes sense in a vacuum. But if you're not building out the trenches first, you're going to suffer. And I think that's the direction the Panthers have taken. Like, if you look at the 3 teams that have $25 million $25 million wide receivers, it's the Bengals now, the Dolphins, and the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles had built up the trenches for 10 years, on and on and on before they paid wide receivers. I just think kind of from their perspective, trading a high value asset and then paying a guy top of market value when they have all the leverage is not something that this organization at this point needs to be doing or wants to be doing. So what I would say is, look, them drafting wide receivers has panned out about as well as, Wile E. Coyote's pursuits of the Roadrunner. I wrote that in my newsletter today. I got another reference like later on in the mailbag this week. Just stick around for that. But what I would say is, like, from their perspective, I don't want to say the fan base is missing the mark here with any franchise altering wide receiver. They need a very specific franchise altering wide receiver. They don't just need like an X. They need a guy who can stretch the field and also have possession traits. The one guy in free agency who still kind of makes sense there, even though he's over 30, is Brandon Cooks. He's a guy who can stretch the field, open up the box, allow runners to get free alleys, allow guys to clean up underneath, allow Xavier Legette to do his gadget stuff. I know people don't want to hear that, but like, that's cool. And if you don't want them to sign a 30-year-old wide receiver because they already have a 35-year-old, guess who profiles almost exactly like a very young Brandon Cooks in the NFL draft? His name is Matthew Golden, and he plays for Texas. Almost verbatim player from early Brandon Cooks. And I think he makes a ton of sense, especially as you are trying to evade costs. Because if you're paying a wide receiver a fudge ton of money, I know this is a kid's show.
Oh, please. You missed the beginning when I was sitting here hurling
well, I'm a kid's kid. What I would say is if you look at the trajectory of the position, you want to be able to cost control it for a while, because I don't want to say they've wasted 2 years of Bryce Young, but Bryce Young is going to have his 5th-year option, decision coming up in a year, right? And then if that doesn't work out, what do you do? And then if it does work out, do you want to get ahead on, like paying him an extension? Like, I think you're looking at a team that's keeping a lot of their options open on multiple timelines. Part of the reason why Taylor Moton's probably not going to have his contract altered this year. They want to have wiggle room for when they can truly spend and get off of the previous regime's dime. And so I think, look, Brandon Aiyuk, there are several. Do you want me to just like completely douse
everything?
Those?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, everything.
Here's why Brandon Aiyuk will not be. Look, I'm sure that this will be replayed over and over again if they can get him for a 6th-round pick. But
can't wait.
6th-round pick. Here's the thing. So let's play detective here, okay? I'm going to throw out some clues to you. So they just had a wide receiver who turned out to not be a great fit for the locker room. They traded him away to move up and around like 20 spots. He wore out his welcome moving forward. It was a low risk, high reward trade that turned out to be a whatever, right? Like, they didn't lose anything from it. If anything, they just, had a nice little 3rd-round bump or third day bump. They just drafted a running back in the 2nd round who was coming off an ACL injury and almost immediately retore that ACL. Guess what Brandon Aiyuk just suffered? Yep. Mm-hmm. And then also thinking about like how they were not truly invested in the markets for DK Metcalf and T. Higgins from a contract standpoint or a trade compensation standpoint. What do you guys think?
I almost choked, and I thought it was because I had that green food dye at the bottom of my beer, but I think it was actually because of the way that Mike just pretty much shut all of that down.
If there was a guy that I could think of who was making a ton of money, who was at the wide receiver position that I definitely do not think they would trade for, it's Brandon Aiyuk. I can't think of a guy who is literally checks every box of like what they should have learned from last year.
Yeah.
Brandon Aiyuk's a really good player. I'm not hating on him. I just think, like, what? Like, I mean,
it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're going to deal with, like, the 49ers are already showing buyer's remorse and putting him up for sale. Like, they weren't in on Deebo Samuel. I think this team's trying to tell you, wait, here's the best part. You've got a head coach who's a former wide receivers coach, an offensive coordinator who's a former wide receivers coach. You have a wide receivers coach who's a former Pro Bowl wide receiver. If these guys can't develop wide receiver talent, what are we even talking about here? So the fact that everybody wants to continue to like trade for these veteran guys, I get it. You want the fast pass lane. I totally understand. And DK Metcalf would have been a guy I would have gone after, although that money is unreal. The trade price was not. If they weren't going to be in on that, then like I don't. Right? Like, I feel like this isn't even me reporting. I feel like this is just like genuine logic if you step back and you think about it.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Mike. And Curtis or Ricky, if one of you guys will bring up that super chat that we had, I'm going to ask that to Mike. But before I ask, I did want to show some appreciation to Mike, because not all of throughout our history being a podcast and having relationships with reporters, big time reporters, I'll say, to give you some kudos, Mike. not all of you guys are super willing to come on. And anytime we reach out to Mike, he's very happy to come on and talk to us small fish here. So I want to give you props, man, because like the community that you're building on Twitter and just interacting with the fan base, we genuinely appreciate it. And you're always so open and ready to come on whenever we ask. So we appreciate that a lot. And
so cheers to Mike and our super chat. We're not forgetting the cheers. So.
Absolutely.
Great. So you can surround me with beer and the whole professional thing goes out there. Listen, I appreciate you guys. Like it's not lip service. I appreciate what you guys do. Ricky and I have had a lot of conversations since I've been here. And no, I appreciate you guys. Like, I'm just a guy. Like I understand that I have the platform, but like I love talking ball. I appreciate you guys. I was once you guys. Like 12 years ago, I was hosting a podcast pretty similar to this. So I totally respect it. I appreciate the way you guys promote the newsletter and the content and stuff. And yeah, I mean, whatever. I'm just a dude. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just a dude. But Zach Nelson, big fan of Zach Nelson. I like Zach.
Mike Kaye, greater than everything else in the world. What position do we go at 8? I know that's a pretty loaded question. I would, kind of preface it with, the way we're sitting right now with the moves we made in free agency. What position would, in your opinion, do you think Carolina should go at 8?
So it's kind of a cop-out, but I think like they're set up to go edge. But like, again, it just kind of feels like everything, like context clue wise, tells you that the strength of this draft is front 7. And so if you pass on an edge in the first round, you might be able to get like a Kyle Kennard. You might be able to get like somebody of that ilk who is maybe like a DJ Wanham, like immediate contributor, but with upside. I just think at wide receiver, like, I'm not the biggest Tet McMillan guy. Like, I get it. But what we just talked about is their specific need. This team can't get yards after the catch. They're very slow. I just, to me, Matthew Golden, whether you're picking at 8 or you're trading back a few picks, to me makes the most sense right now. That doesn't mean they couldn't do something different. Maybe they surprise us and I have egg on my face and they trade for, a wide receiver that they feel could be a number 1. But to me, like, the wide receiver class isn't as good as it was last year, but the pass rusher class feels like it's better than last year. So I think you have to play the odds there. And remember, like, they've taken wide receivers in the second round twice and essentially the second round, but trade up by 1 pick last year. You haven't had the opportunity to draft a top 10 pick wide receiver in a while. And so I do wonder if they, this is a team ultimately run by a wide receivers coach. And so I think it's very interesting to kind of see the tea leaves there. I do my two favorite guys in that I've watched in this like first round, like whatever. I think talking to people around, it feels like it's a 6-guy draft. And then after that, it's a lot of like everybody's kind of on a similar playing field from like 7 to 25. I really like the kid from Boston College. He reminds me of Cliff Averill. I'm going to butcher his name, so I'm not even going to attempt it.
Donovan Ezraku.
Yeah. And then I think Golden's going to be special. Like, I really like, he's fun to watch. But yeah, I would say wide receiver or edge are probably your 2 positions that I would imagine.
Mike, while we're on that topic of the draft, do you think there's any weight to Canalis's, I don't know if you want to say love, but him speaking highly of Tyler Warren? I know that drafting a tight end high is something that really hasn't panned out in this league, where you got to tread lightly with. But he spoke very highly of him at the combine. I was watching another podcast today that the Panthers put up, and they spoke very highly of him early on. Do you think there is, Canalis would value that? Because it's if you look at his past offenses, it's hard to believe that. But and maybe it's just coach talk at the combine. But do you think there is some love there from Canalis for a guy like Warren?
I think they're intrigued by him. I don't know that they like love him. I think he's kind of like a unicorn, right? Like, And also, if you conceptualize the point that like Taysom Hill's been a pain in the butt for this team for years, and if somebody tells you, "Hey, you can get one of those," I could see how that could be intriguing. I don't know that they feature the tight end enough to make that logical. That said, if they feel like none of these guys are number one wide receivers and you want to build the offense around the middle of the field, I think that makes sense. Although typically shorter quarterbacks tend to avoid the slot and the middle of the field. Obviously, Bryce hasn't really done that. We've seen Adam Thielen get used pretty well on crossers across the field. He's, a tiptoe thrower. He's got a high release. I'd be surprised just because from a value standpoint, that would be a very Chris Ballard-esque move of taking a non-premium position with a premium pick just because of the high floor. And I think that this front office is a little bit more thoughtful than that. Granted, we only have 1 year of true, opinion drawing from that, even though they've let go of half the scouting department basically after that first draft. So I would be very surprised, but I don't think I would be shocked, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One other draft thing for you, Mike, and it kind of ties into the free agency. It ties into the player that we know that they had atop their board. We talked about it, Trayvon Merrick, safety from Las Vegas. He plays that in the box, like run support type of brand of safety. He's not necessarily – now he has the versatility, has the athleticism and skill set to play deep. You don't want him pressing a receiver or a tight end at the line necessarily, but he could play high. But really what it seems like, they have not brought in anybody else. Now, I know you floated the idea originally, right, before some of the other signings. Could they look at double tapping there with Javon Holland, who gives you that other element at the safety room? They didn't do that. Right now, Damani Richardson, the undrafted free agent, is the only other safety in that room.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility, Mike, and I know that you don't know what they're doing, but from a feel of the organization and the importance of a safety in that Fangio-driven scheme that Evero runs, is there a possibility that a guy like Malachi Starks could potentially be somebody that they are intrigued by? Or could they also be looking at this and saying, hey, we know the archetype now of player that we want to bring in for that other role? There's guys like Andrew Makuba, Billy Bowman Jr., Xavier Watts from Notre Dame. We don't know how the board will fall, but there are real center field type prospects out there that could be a really nice complement. Do you think that they are still eyeing that position for a starter in free agency, or is it more like, hey, we want to fill in at depth and then we want to get our player in the draft?
I think if they bring in somebody from free agency, it would be a bargain hunt and probably build as a competition with at least Damani. I think Bowman makes a lot of sense from the standpoint of that archetype, to tell you the truth. I love that you brought him up, but I don't know, it's a week into free agency, and I get all of the tweets that's like, I can't believe that Dan Morgan hasn't done that. Well, they made Trevon Moehrig a top 5 paid safety, and without breaking the mark, resetting the market when he's in his mid-20s, and is exactly what they needed.
I got to know which Twitter user that was, the voice that you just did, because there's something specific. That was a really good character.
Yeah,
voice.
I got one today, and I was just like, my guy, I get it. I love how passionate this fan base can be, but it's it hasn't even officially been 7 days. You know what I mean? The negotiating period's been open for a week, but there's a lot going on. I do think they would have had interest in Holland had he not priced out. I think a guy in free agency who could make sense as a flyer would be Julian Blackman, who registered a ton of snaps last year, did not play particularly well, but he fits kind of that free safety mold. I think Elijah Riley would be a very cheap competition guy who's kind of bumped around the league. But yeah, getting back to Starks, I think that would be too high of a pick for their blood. I don't know when they would look at safety, but I think they should look as early as the second round. I mean, it just depends on what you do in the first round. Like, that's the thing, is like when you're a team that has so many needs, it's like BPA, by the way, is like a construct. It's not
that's what I was gonna ask you about, was the whole best player available thing.
It's not an actual thing, guys. Like, everybody else has a different
I have the beholder.
Yeah, thank you. It depends on, like, everybody's board. All four of our boards would be radically different. I promise you. Like, outside of like the top four guys, guarantee you they'd be all over the place, right? Like, I like Matt Golden. I know people that like Ted. There's, I know people that like Mike Green more than they like Jalen Walker. I know, I mean, it's like, it just depends on what you want. And so it's like a subjective BPA. So truly, there's no such thing as BPA. Unless you're following consensus to like the T, which to me seems kind of ridiculous.
Not a good
idea. What I would say is the way that they've attacked the defensive line and the way they attacked the offensive line last year lets me know that they believe in trench play. They believe everything starts up the middle. And so to me, if they were to take a safety in the first round, that safety better be a game-changing player, a player that you feel like can play nickel, can play free safety, can play every zone coverage, can play man coverage, can blitz, can do, like, you need a guy who is like, I don't want to say like Brian Dawkins, because he probably would have had to tone his career down quite a bit, but you need a guy who is like a home run hitter. You need a Derwin James player to do this. And so I think for them, you want to nail down premium positions. I think when you have an analytics department typically, and a good one, they're typically understanding what the value of each pick is. And if you understand the value of each pick, it makes you want to spend more on premium positions.
Mike, I do want to ask you about a player. I don't know if you want to call him polarizing, but it's either a love or hate with this fan base, and that's Jalen Walker. What do you see out of him? And do you think there is more intrigue with his teammate Michael Williams? Because it seems like that is starting to shift within and I get it, it's mock drafts on a national basis, but there's a shift from everyone had Carolina looking at Jalen Walker early on, and it's kind of shifted to Michael Williams over the last couple of weeks.
So I think this is a great question, and I think I want to choose my words wisely, because I know that some of this might get aggregated. So I want to be very prudent here. I can tell you what my internal philosophy is based on the logic, okay? Jalen Walker, everybody's talking about, can be like this guy that plays in all these different positions and whatever. He's also an extremely undersized guy if you're going to use him as a pass rusher. There is one Elvis Dumerville for every, I mean, he's a little bit bigger than him, but there's like one Elvis Dumerville for every 1,000 pass rushers. Here's the thing. Everybody's like, oh, he could be a replacement to Frankie Louvu. Well, they didn't even really use Frankie Louvu correctly his year that he was here. There were opportunities for him to outside rush. He didn't really do that. He blitzed a lot, but he was terrible against the run, like terrible.
Yep.
I think Dan Quinn's used him significantly better. He also is like an expert on hybrid players. And what I would also say is everybody's like, oh, well, he could replace Frankie Louvu. Well, guess what? Frankie Louvu wasn't drafted to play like Frankie Louvu. He was drafted to be an outside. I mean, he was signed to be an outside linebacker. He was, as an undrafted free agent, he dropped because he had quirks in his game that didn't work in a natural position. So they found one. Then they're like, oh, maybe he can be like Zach Bond. Well, guess what? Zach Bond was drafted as an outside linebacker and was misused in New Orleans for 4 years, and then was suddenly figured out as an inside linebacker who almost exclusively played inside linebacker by Vic Fangio. Oh, and then there was Andrew Van Ginkel. You remember him, that old chestnut. He was not drafted to play a hybrid role. He was drafted to be more of an inside linebacker than anything, and they figured out how to utilize him in multiple different ways. So Zach Bond was a 3rd-round pick. Van Ginkel was a 5th-round pick. Frankie was undrafted. Typically, you make guys multiple versatile positions so you can make up for their lack of gifts in their natural position. And I think if you're spending a number one, like a top 10 pick on a player to force a hybrid thing, well, then I think you should study the Arizona Cardinals, who bombed with Hassan Reddick until his final year when they figured out what he was. Isaiah Simmons, they bombed with him too. Xavier Collins, they had to move around a bunch. Like, you don't spend that type of value unless you are looking at a guy who can have either an incredibly high ceiling or an incredibly high floor. And when you're a hybrid player, you have the risk factor is there. To me, I think he's an inside linebacker. I just think if you're going to make him, if you're going to draft him 8th overall, you've got to view him as a full-time edge to make the thing work. Now let's get to Mike Williams. He's 20 years old. Perfect time to take a pass rusher. The reason why the DJ Johnson pick to me was so asinine, even at the time, before everybody was like, give him a chance. No, see, here's the thing. When you're a young pass rusher, you ascend into your job. And by 24, you're built. Like, that's who you are. Like, you can rent a car and stuff, I'm pretty sure.
And he was a tight end up until like 22 and a half.
Right. Also, by the way, 3-cone drills are more pertinent than the 40.
Than
and
the
they
40.
brought up the 40. They brought up the 40 so often. I was like, none of this matters.
Yep.
Like, he
at least the 10-yard split if you're gonna look at the 40, right?
But he had no bend. There was no pass rushing moves, and lo and behold, 2 years later, Ricky has half a sack less than he does.
That's
so,
right.
like, congrats to you and your family.
I've been playing really well though, Mike. Don't undersell me, man.
So what I would say, and look, if all goes well, DJ's probably competing for a job in training camp, like to keep his job, right? Because you've brought in enough edge rushers that you've replaced him. I think from an upside standpoint and from a premium pick standpoint and coming from the pedigree that he's coming from, there's nothing but upside here. Could he bomb out? Sure. But what do we talk about? Extreme upside or extreme floor? And to me, extreme floor would be like somebody like Quentin Nelson, right? Where you knew he was going to just be, but he's not a premium position. So you're like, but Mike Williams does make total sense. He's an athletic freak. The numbers will never be public with him because they're having their private workouts, but I'd love to know what his 3-cone is. He's a guy who I think can ascend. And if you feel like you have really good teachers, I've heard nothing but good things about AC Carter from people outside the organization. They brought him in for a reason. I think if they feel like they can develop him with Todd Wash, who has developed guys like Yannick Ngakoue and Aiden Hutchinson, like, I think that there's some logic there. I think that makes sense. I don't know if either one of those guys is going to be the pick, but I think of the two, Mike Williams, the shift makes sense because it's logic. I'm not saying that they'll pass on, Jalen Walker for him, but to me, like, Jalen Walker's a good football player. Like, and I'm all for just adding good football players, but I think if you're a team that is really aware of value, which is what this team probably should be, it makes sense to take the natural edge rusher who is nothing but ascension.
Ricky's got a question, and then we'll end with Bryson. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but
sorry, I know I ramble. I take up all the time, but that way we try to whatever.
Look, we would sit here and listen to you ramble all night, Mike. We're just worried about holding you up past when you want to be here with us listening to you ramble.
Hey, I don't have the kids around today, so I'm a little
That's fair. All right, so we got like another 2 hours of Mike's time
man.
here. No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. But the question I have, Mike, kind of does tie into what we were just talking about, right? With this like hybrid linebacker fascination. It is kind of like a rage right now that everyone is talking about as well. Zach Bond just got paid. There's a couple other guys that like everyone's just saying like this is who we want. My thing is when I look at this draft, and we just had Brooks Austin on a show that I do with Edgar Salmingo Jr. called Draft Crush. We have Brooks kind of talking about these Georgia guys, and he brought up that same thing with Mike Kaye. He's 20 years old. His pass rush is way more refined than what he was allowed to kind of show. Not even allowed, but like facilitated and manufactured to show in Georgia with their scheme. But with Jalen, if you're going to play him at off ball for a large percent of the time, Jahad Campbell seems like more of a natural linebacker at that position. He seems like a more dynamic guy. He's got the length. He's got the size. He also was the #1 rated edge coming out of high school and just kind of got stuck behind a lot of talent at Alabama. Will Anderson is a guy that people might be familiar with. But so when you look at it, what I have a hard time with, Mike, and this is where I'm rambling to get to, I feel like a lot of what they're looking at for the draft, especially from a fan standpoint, I don't know what the temperature check is on guys like Xavier Legette with his franchise, Trevin Wallace, and even Shaw Smith-Wade to an extent, because these are positions that were just drafted last season, right? Last draft. And Xavier Legette, when we talk about Tyler Warren and trying to see like, hey, are we reading too much into the way they're talking about him? It's also because this coach talked about Xavier Legette so openly, and then Xavier talked so openly about their fascination that we're driven to that. We're drawn to it. But like, if they still feel like X is the one, if he's their guy, he could be their Mike Evans in the system. Wide receiver doesn't look as important from like the outside looking in, at least.
Sure.
Trevin Wallace, if he is still a guy that Dan is really high on, just from an individual standpoint, right, as a player evaluation, from a linebacker to look at Trevin and his athleticism, I thought he struggled a little bit. I thought his processing was a little bit slow. I thought that he got washed out a little bit in the run. But his athleticism showed up sometimes, and it showed why they were high on him. But are they still high enough on these guys to stop them from allocating high draft capital at the same position?
I think it's a really great question. Like, and I'm not trying to do that to buy time. I'm just saying, like, it's just so much to process, right? Like, that we don't know, right? Like, they want Trevin to start, but that doesn't mean, that doesn't preclude them from taking a great football player at 8, in my opinion. Like, I don't think, like, you can say Bryce is solidified. You can say Adam Thielen's definitely playing in the slot.
Robert Hunt is going to play right guard.
Right. Chuba's going to play right. You know what I mean? Like, but there's so many different spots. And I think that that's a really fair, like, I really like Shaw. I really think the upside with Shaw, just from a mental standpoint, is really important. And remember, he had never played nickel before. Like, before the Senior Bowl, he didn't know what a nickel position really did. And so I think the upside's high for him. Should they bring in competition for him? Absolutely. Trevin Wallace, I think Christian Roseboom, that contract tells you that he's going to push him. I don't think he's going to win that job. I think Trevin Wallace will start. Now, if they bring in a first-round linebacker, all bets are off, right? I don't think this team has the luxury, though, of like turning off from their picks. Like Mingo, they get a pass because he was abysmal. He's maybe the one of I'm trying to think of who was worse for the value, him or Jalen Reagor, of the guys that I've covered in the league. But that just tells you everything, right? Like, nice. So, or no, JJ Arcega-Whiteside. JJ Arcega-Whiteside was the worst wide receiver pick I've ever covered.
The names aren't getting any better, though, for anyone keeping score at home.
But that was Philly before Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, right? Like, so it happens. There's light at the end of the tunnel, I guess. I think what's interesting, though, about Legette is I think ideally he profiles as a really good number 2.
Right.
To me, I don't know that he's dynamic enough to be an X receiver after watching him. Now, with that said, I'd give him some grace. If that foot injury legitimately bothered him, I've talked about it all the time. He has the most unique stride for a professional athlete I have ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's phantom riding a horse. When he he's been riding a horse for so long, right?
Can't get past it.
That's not me criticizing him. No. I think he runs very hard. I don't think he takes plays off. I think he's a competitor. But the question is what's his upside, right? And I think, a good discussion is T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. They drafted T. Higgins at 33, and the next year they drafted Jamar Chase. The Eagles traded up to draft Devontae Smith at 10. The next year, they traded a 1 for and a 3rd for A.J. Brown. Wide receiver is a position where you can gradually just invest in that position, and nobody's going to look at you wrong. It's the same way with corner.
Yeah.
And to me, there are less true number 1 corners than there are true number 1 wide receivers. And it's a matter of figuring out who is a true number 1 wide receiver. And truthfully, like DJ Moore to me was a very, 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 very good number 2 wide receiver. There's a reason why they drafted Rome the next year. Like, that's the thing, is if you can't identify a top 10 to 12 wide receiver, you have to keep looking. And so I would not hold it against them if they drafted Ted or Golden or whatever. But I think you have to look at value and where this team is. Next year, if they trade a number 1 first overall pick for a $30 million wide receiver, I would not bat an eyelash. I would not criticize them whatsoever. But that's next year. I don't think this year is the year. As much as it pains everybody. Trust me, if you don't think that I'd like to cover a dynamic number 1 wide receiver who would give me great quotes and tell good story, like that's the thing. Like, nobody's rooting against this stuff. It's just a logical thing. But yeah, I think I don't even remember what the original question is. But like the young guys, right? Like I think this team is so new, right? I can tell you who their pillars are. Take Bryce out of the equation because he's the quarterback of the now. We'll figure out if he's the quarterback of the long-term future. Their pillars are Robert Hunt, Chuba Hubbard. You could argue Damian Lewis, J.C. Horn, Derek Brown. Those are their pillars of this team. That's who they are. Those are the guys, the non-negotiable pillars. Everybody else is trying to just prove themselves and ascend. That's literally what this is.
Yep.
Before Bryson goes, I'm going to try to sneak one in here. Don't kill me, Mike.
No, never. No.
But trading, and I want to get your take. Do you think it's more likely they would trade back from 8 to a pick in the teens, or do you think it's more likely they would trade up in the second round to go and get a guy to move up in that second round?
What if they could do both in one shot?
Yeah. Acquire additional day 2 picks, package to move up. Is that what you're thinking?
So something I've been toying with in my brain is, so they're picking at 57, right? Because of the Rams. So they're far back in that thing.
Yep.
But the teams that would be in the teens would be picking above the Rams in that second round.
Right.
So part of the logic could be, hey, do you go back to 11 or 12 and package 57 so you can move up into the 30s? And that's the true value. And then you add a third round pick there, maybe.
So
way you're adding a day 2 pick. So you pick 10 times. Good for you. Yay. Wonderful. But you're suppressing the value of the first round pick so that you can take advantage of the strength of the class in the second round.
Yeah. Okay.
That's just what you call clever accounting if you were a producer from Broadway.
So
you make more with a flop than with a hit. But you
got that right, Curtis. Curtis, you are a producer in Broadway, so you got that right. Okay.
But that's what I would say is, like, I think with 8 and the way the class is, you've got to be clever with the way you're trading back. To me, the ideal trade partner is Dallas, because if Will Campbell falls to 8, they have so much they need to redo on the line, and they clearly don't want to pay. So if you can trade back with them, swap second round picks and get a third round pick, I think, everybody wins from that one. And so if you're back at 12, Matt Golden, who might not be the consensus number 1 wide receiver or whatever, you can draft him. You could draft the BC kid. You can do whatever. I think Mike Green's going to be kind of a tough sell, just because I know he had some off the field stuff, unless that's truly vetted. I don't know. So I'm not trying to jump to conclusions or anything. I'm just saying,
right,
like, if that is a thing, if that gets vetted and they don't see what they like, then what are you going to do? Right. I think that's going to be a tough sell. I think you've got to be really comfortable with a guy. If you're taking a guy top 15, like, you just have to know there have been so many wasted picks for this organization. You have to feel very comfortable. And I think this is a team that really cares about off the field.
Right.
And so you're going to have to, Mike's try to clear his name, as he has every right to do. And there's a lot of missing information, but I guarantee you the Panthers will find some sort of information to clarify whether what he says is accurate or whatever happened. So I think, those aren't just like, you can't just make a decision off of not vetting something, is all.
Right. Well, and it's tough too, because we've had, verified people. Devin Jackson, we spoke with him, and he was at the combine and said, hey, look, we spoke with multiple teams, and there are teams that have Mike Green off their board. Now, it's not because they necessarily think like he's some awful guy or something, but they weren't comfortable maybe with some of the answers that they got, the resolution that they got when looking into those. They're just not willing to look into it. That's not something they would allocate a high resource to. And James Pierce Jr. is another guy that Panthers fans are talking about. He's a Charlotte native, and he's got off the field stuff. And the big concern there, if you bring him home, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Right? Like, because sometimes that support system can help. Sometimes that closed circle can be a detriment. And there's no way to know that without the proper vetting. So I think that's a really important thing that you just touched on there, Mike.
And look, I've covered guys who, wasn't great to bring them home, wasn't great to have them in, the city that they were in. Like, if you go to the wrong city, it can lead to problems. And so I just think, like, But I also know that there are a lot of teams that have a very strict, if you put your hands on a woman, period, you're not coming. Like, that's just like not a thing.
Wild concept, huh?
Yeah. I mean, but, there are clearly other teams that don't practice what the others preach. And so I think, I think the vetting system is going to be, I think, not for nothing, I think they're good human beings in that Panthers locker room. And I think that matters to them. Some organizations, it doesn't necessarily, to a certain extent. And so I think they're going to want these guys. Like, you remember the way they talked about X, and like, I remember his first, I understood why they took him and why he interviewed well. His first press conference, when he looks at you, he makes you feel like you're the only person in the room. And that is a very unique concept for a person who is very early in their 20s.
Sounds like a Julia Roberts movie, man. That's lovely.
Yeah, hey, well, I don't know if you guys remember this, but I had a broken arm at the time, and I think it got picked up on the press conference.
We remember,
X comes up to me, and he shakes my hand, and the only other play, I wasn't expecting it, because the only other player who's ever done that in his rookie press conference is DJ Chark, and that blew me away at the time. But he comes up, and I don't remember if it was a fist bump or like a handshake, but he like shook, like whatever it was impactful. And I think it got I'm glad I didn't curse or anything. But the shockwave that went up my arm, because it was pre-surgery, and so my arm's like dilapidated in this thing, and I just went, oh man, that was not a smart choice on my part.
We remember our quarterback too being very concerned about you when you had the broken arm. He came in and was like, "Oh man, are you okay?" Yeah,
it was all down. It was all downhill from there. I was getting made fun of left and right. But, I think character matters to this team.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think at the end of the day, we want to win football games, but I think fans like to cheer for players and people that are also good people. Other outside of football. So I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. But Mike, I have two questions for you, kind of not pertaining to Panthers football. I like to just kind of get down to the people aspect, people side of your job and other people's job across the country. So first question, I'm making two assumptions. One is you've lived in other places outside of Charlotte.
Sure.
You've covered Philly, Jacksonville, right? If I'm not mistaken. And the other assumption is that you currently live in or around Charlotte. So what is your favorite thing about living in North Carolina? You've lived a couple different places in the country. What is your favorite thing about living in this state?
The weather, the scenery. I like that we get seasons, but it's not like so abrasive.
Yeah.
Like in the Northeast, there are abrasive winters and there are abrasive summers. In Jacksonville, abrasive summers. In Phoenix, the way I explain Phoenix heat is like, have you ever opened up an oven, like a preheat for a pizza, at 400? if you could, like, but the first time you open the oven and you feel that like, sort of thing, that's what it's like all summer. So what I like it about that, I like that people are so friendly and it doesn't feel forced.
Yeah.
I appreciate all of the philanthropy that's going on in the city. I think that that's really cool. My kids love my son loves his school. I'm like an extroverted introvert. Like, I don't go out a lot. Like, that's just not me. I should say, Ricky knows the answer to this. My favorite part of being in Charlotte is Alex Zudlow. I love being a beat partner with him. And
I was so disappointed that wasn't the first answer.
I should. It's interesting, because I have lived in different places and I've had other beat partners, and Alex is somebody who's going to add years to my career here, because I think, one, he's like a supernova of talent. Like, his upside, he is. Well, I can't think of a lot of Panthers to think of upside wise that would compare to him, but you know what I mean.
A former Panthers reporter, Jonathan Jones, right? Who's ascended through.
Yeah, he's a little bit of a different, like, I would say that, like, he's more of like a beat writer. I think Alex is so much more than a beat writer. I think
storyteller, man. Alex is
he's a storyteller.
Yeah.
Like, he's more like Jordan. Like,
Jordan, that's true, but that's what I was going to mention.
Yeah, I think Jonathan and I are very similar, even though I'm older than all of these people we're talking about. And I get a lot of the, well, you know, you're going to go on to bigger and brighter. I mean, like, I worked in Philly. Like, I've done my travels. Like, I love it here, and I truly love working for the Observer. I truly do. I love working with Scott Fowler. I love my editor. Like, that's not lip service. I would say it off the record or off the mic anyway.
Mike's trying to get a raise here. I see.
Well, you know, it wouldn't hurt, but I would say, like, I mean, I like where I work, and in this industry, that's really important. And you have to, like, partners, and we're competitors just like the people on the field. And, you know, I like interacting with the fans. Like, this has been such a great move for me. And I'm trying to, like, think of the right word. Like, I do write for a living. I just, like, enjoy the opportunity here. Like, I think the upside of the city is huge. I think once this team starts winning, everybody who I've talked to who've been around for a while, like, people will feel that. Like, I like the intensity of some people. Sometimes I'll be sarcastic and have quips back, but, like, I like interacting with folks. Like, I'm not hiding from interactions, as you guys know. And I just think Charlotte's awesome. I'll give you, you know, this job, there were only 2 cities I was willing to go to leave Philly. And it had nothing to do with market. It had nothing to do with the team. It just, I love Charlotte. I've really enjoyed my times here before and whatever. And it was Charlotte and Miami, and those were the 2. And look, we had my second kid here. Like, I'm grateful to be here. To be the long answer. Answer.
And I think I speak for all 3 of us that we are very grateful to have you, and hope that you continue that love, because we do not want to lose a reporter like you, man, because we appreciate the work that you put in and the interaction that we talked about before, you know, that you provide us fans. So my other question, I know you are a baseball fan, and I think I picked up from Twitter, you kind of cheer for the Phillies, if I'm not mistaken.
Me?
I don't know if you've heard, Mike. I don't know if you've heard, but Raleigh is trying to get a baseball team, right?
Absolutely perfect area for a baseball team.
Yeah. I grew up in North Carolina, and not having a Major League Baseball team, I never really became a fan of baseball. But once Raleigh gets one, I'm taking the baseball sucks out of my bio on Twitter, and I'm going to be the biggest baseball fan in the world.
You're so brave.
So my hope for you is that once Raleigh gets a baseball team, you can move off the Phillies and become a Raleigh baseball team fan. So I wanted to pose that question to you. Can you leave the Phillies behind and make that full move to North Carolina and be that Raleigh baseball fan?
So that's not going to happen, but I'll tell you why. So when you cover a sport, like when you cover a team, you can't be a fan, right? Like, that's just not the way it is. And so eventually this job becomes, while it's a fun job, it is your occupation. You need, and when you cover it, like I cover it, where it's like, and a lot of our colleagues cover it. I'm not putting anybody else down, but like when you cover it as intensely as someone like I do, you need like a release. And, you know, Philly is very important to me, obviously. And so, like, when I moved here, in particular, the Phillies were like a way of feeling like I wasn't completely just, you know, outside of that stuff. And so, it's kind of my escape. Like, that's what it is. Like, you know what I mean? It's like my hobby. Like, I'm watching spring training games like a crazy person. You know what I mean? Like, a crazy person. Now, I think Raleigh is the perfect spot. I don't think Charlotte is built for I mean, you've got this goofball in here who likes the Braves.
Yeah. Jared Feinberg is in here giving Mike all kinds of hell.
Yeah, I hope he's
a
adding.
Braves fan.
I wasn't putting the Braves comment up.
Hey, the next time he flashes on here, it better be a super chat, okay?
Oh,
My time is
oh,
money.
yeah.
The three of us should be
Put money
ashamed of
where your
ourselves
mouth is,
because Mike.
Jared.
Yeah, we should be ashamed of ourselves because Mike just did a much better job of pushing the super chat in this episode.
We never touched
than
it at all.
any of us have done
We
at
didn't
all
touch
tonight.
it at all.
By
today.
the way, you know what doesn't cost money? The Panthers oh, I can say this properly. The Access Panthers newsletter
Yes.
comes out every Monday in your
Amazing.
email inbox twice a week, twice for during the regular season too.
How do they find that, Mike? Where do they go?
Well, I think is the link in my bio? I'm trying to.
I think it is. Let me look.
No, that's just my profile thing. Useless. Just screwing up here. Here, wait. I'll put it in right now. How about that for How about technology, folks?
Instant.
Wait, why is it? I'm trying to. Hold
I
on.
have not seen it pop up.
Huh. Suffering.
Well, you can see, we can all see anyone who's watching this, and shout out to, we have over 1,300 people watching the episode. Appreciate everyone for watching. If you do not like and subscribe to the channel, now is a great time to do that. Also, a great time to go and follow Mike on X or Twitter at Mike_E_K. K has a Kaye at the end. Go follow that. He is in process of getting a link put in there where you can find his newsletter that he was just talking about. That is a terrific Panthers resource as well.
Boom, it's in there. Let's do it.
There.
Okay, so if you go to my profile and then there's the link there, technology, what a blessing, right?
Can confirm via sources.
Boom.
It is there.
And it's directly to the newsletter. I think earlier you guys tweeted out the one with like the 50 other newsletters. This one's a little bit easier to find. No, you're good. No, I appreciate you showing some love, but you know, it's been fun being on here. I know originally I was like 15 to 20 minutes, and I'm like, Mike, I'm having an internal dialogue. It's like, Mike, you know, you can't do less than like 20 minutes.
Well, we appreciate your internal struggle there of not wanting to like.
People at this hotel are probably like, this obnoxious guy keeps talking about Xavier Legette for some reason.
Well, he's got a very specific gate. What are we supposed to do?
Yeah,
We should
Mike,
talk
did you
about
try
it,
the
right?
raccoon, Mike? Did you try it?
I would say nay. No.
Oh man, how do you finish with a dad joke like that? That is so on brand, Mike.
Oh man, you're just like building me up.
Yeah, a little bit.
What I would say is keep an eye out for the safety market and free agency. I do think that they're going to try to add someone there. I think nickel corner is a spot that, you know, whatever. And then I would also say, you know, I'm not trying to build up the wide receiver stuff for the draft, but I do think there's logic there. I think something that they've done well, and I think it's frustrating probably for fans, is that I think they've kept their cards close to the vest. I saw somebody
that was my
radio.
question. That was going to be one of my questions to you, because we talked about that last week, and I don't mean to cut you off. We last year, we all know Legette blew the pick and said the Panthers were going to take him, and I don't, just the base off of what I heard at the combine, it's like, are they keeping things close to the vest this time around? Did they learn from that mistake last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's part of that. I think that there is another world where a certain other player doesn't get picked and they pick him, and then they're suddenly like, and then Xavier Legette is, you know, somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like, I think it definitely probably put them in like a PR bind for sure. But I think like, no, I think they've done a good job. Like I saw somebody outright said, I heard they like this player. It's like, cool. Well, does the person that said that actually have the authority to like truly, you know, talk about their board? And if they do, are they morons?
Right.
Look, and that's not to say you don't hear stuff or verify stuff, but it's also a reason why, like, I see some of this stuff, like people that are not in the industry and they're trying to break news and stuff like that and whatever. I mean, sometimes they're right. You'd be surprised how much sometimes folks are right. I'm not hating on anybody, but I think when you grow up in this business, you learn that, you know, certain things need multiple sources. And you know, I had probably 10 of you guys in my DMs, not you guys specifically, but I got asked a lot about the T. Higgins stuff. And I would just say it tells you a lot that none of us touched it. Like no one that you guys normally go to for your information touched it, is what I would say. And I'm not going to
stop DMing Mike. It's
I'm not going to address every rumor. You know what I mean? Like, because you see some wild stuff on here that like sometimes like I'll see it and maybe you don't see it, right? And you're like, and so like I think, look, you can't blame people for being excited or hearing something and wanting to share it with fans. But I'd also say before getting super stoked about, you know, Johnny Walker 45's, you know, insight, you know, you chill. No, where's the money? Where's the money, Feinberg?
There's no money, Jared.
Damn it, I forgot about that.
Bring me the money.
Forget. Mike Kaye doesn't forget about that stuff.
Mike is up at like 11:30 at night trying to have a little reprieve from the workday, and he's got Jim, Charles, Jared, and Ricky DMing him, and his wife is like, "What is going on with your phone right now?" He's like, "I got these numbers."
Yeah, we're trying to watch
Charlotte.
White Lotus and watch Walton Goggins having the night of his life on HBO, like,
which was fantastic, by the way. Last night, that dialogue between him and Sam Rockwell is gonna live.
Let's not ruin shows around here.
Okay, sorry, Mike. I would DM you and talk about this, but I'm not gonna DM you anymore. The sentiment.
I was truly hating this season of White Lotus until this episode last night. Like hating it. I was like, this is even too much for me, and I like satire as much as anyone. But like,
you're watching The Pit, but that takes everything out of you. Watching The Pit, man.
Yeah, I gotta get on that. That'll be a summer misery.
I'm doing Silo right now.
Fun.
Oh yeah,
I'm a little behind
Silo's
on
fun.
that.
Yeah, Silo's fun.
I caught up on Daredevil, so Mazel Tov and thank you for everybody who recommended.
How many seasons is that?
How
many seasons is that out now?
It was 3, and then I just caught up on the Disney stuff, which I was shocked. The pilots I was not a fan of for the new Disney show. Second 2 episodes ruled. So
have you and Alex considered making a podcast where you do like show and movie reviews? Because I think that's something you guys would be really good at.
So Alex and he made me do a letterbox, and I paid attention to it for like literally a day because like with the kids, like it's impossible to watch like anything good because everybody like. I remember we were trying to watch We Live in Time, and my son came in, had a nightmare, and it's like, well, we're not going to finish this.
That's a wrap.
You know what I mean? Like, so when am I going to watch the one movie with the one Best Picture if you know anything about that movie? Like, I'm not sure. You know.
Was that The Brutalist? Was that one?
No, The Brutalist.
The Brutalist
like,
one.
That's just a matter of time. But the other ones, like, isn't that about like, I don't even know what it's about, but it's high in sexual content is what I would say. Mm-hmm. Like, so it's like impossible to watch in front of kids.
Not family friendly. It's not like
it's not family friendly. It's not like Panthers on Tap. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Or the process.
Well, I don't know. Ricky's talking about donuts. We're in trouble.
Okay, I didn't say it once this entire episode. Why you keep bringing up my bad past?
I like what Ricky brings to the podcast because I've done Ricky's podcast by himself like twice, and I've done your guys' podcast probably twice, but I like this marriage of everybody.
Of like inappropriate. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, I think you guys have like different vibes, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. One thing I'm actually kind of surprised you guys didn't ask about was the rewarding of internal folks, which to me was
I had it on the docket. Brady Christensen.
Yeah, it was like kind of the theme of March, where it's like they were trying to reinforce vibes to create culture. Because I don't think you truly have a culture until your second year of a regime. And I think like Honora, that's what it is. Thank you, Andre. You don't have to pay.
I have seen Honora. I've seen Honora. It shouldn't have won best, but it was an enjoyable watch.
Yeah, that was the vibe that I got from my friends who were like, maybe people don't know. I don't know if I've said this before, if you've asked her about the career, but I was supposed to go to film school in Canada. And due to like crazy circumstances, like I just finished my college degree and got a degree in broadcasting, but I really wanted to be a screenwriter and a producer. And so I've got like a lot of friends who are like film theory minors and majors. And so we've got like a group chat whatever. But like, I forgot. Oh, yeah. So the rewarding, what I think is really interesting is the incentive-based contracts and the fact that they are going out of their way to dangle the carrot in front of a lot of the guys to show, like, if you perform, you're going to get paid. And I think that that's really important. We saw that the Eagles did that with Saquon Barkley. They just did it with Lane Johnson. Like, that's important, especially when you're trying to bring in other free agents. Because if you come here and you sign like a prove-it deal, which is all in vogue if you're not going to get like a 3 or 4 year contract, you want to know you're going to go to a place where if you perform, either you're going to get a raise elsewhere or you're going to get a raise internally if you enjoy the culture. And I think like that's something that hasn't been like a complete theme. Like obviously Johnny Hecker went to Nashville and so did Xavier Woods, played 100% of the snaps and then left.
Does not make any damn sense, but
that was also that. Yeah, but that was also those are those things that you're talking about, Mike, though, like the prove it deals and stuff. It has to like you're validating that that's something that this franchise actually means when they're signing you to that. Like they're not just doing an empty thing where they're saying, hey, 1 year, like you could prove it, when really all they're looking for is a bargain contract. They're saying literally prove it, do the right thing, produce here, show us that you're part of this culture that we're building. We'll stay with you and we'll reward you if you reward us.
I think Mike Jackson's contract is going to mean more for this franchise than a lot of the other contracts dished out this year, because to me, it shows that Dave Canales is taking shots on guys. Dan Morgan made a really forward-thinking trade that paid off. And I think that contract is such a bargain for a number 2 cornerback who's established, who's a veteran. And yeah, you're paying for one really good year, or pretty good year of Mike Jackson. You know, that's the only history you have to pay him off of. But like, they can get out of the contract after a year. And if he doesn't play up to the same way, then whatever. And he doesn't preclude you from taking a cornerback in the first 2 rounds. Like, that's the best of every world, is when you have flexibility. Like, people keep asking me about Taylor Moton. Here's the thing. You're paying a lot of money to those guards. Center's open-ended. Left tackle's somewhat open-ended because you don't know if you're going to sign him to an extension. You don't know if you're going to let him walk. You don't know if you're going to pick up the 5th-year option. You have to keep that in the framework of everything. And yes, Taylor Moton has played his butt off for you, but he's not a star. He has not been to Pro Bowls. He is not, an all-pro. And if you remember properly, throughout most of the season, he was taking vet days off. So for maintenance. So like, there's reason to keep those options open. You also don't know if they can repeat the success of last year. And so I think certain spots you have to, if you're looking at both timelines, you have to keep your options open. That said, for the most part, they've rewarded guys who have earned it. And I think that speaks volumes. It also helps you overlook that maybe some guys who have earned it haven't gotten paid.
I hope that part gets aggregated right there where Mike talks about how that was one of the best signings, because I think that's a really important part. That just shows, like there's impact from different players. It's not always the stars. It's not always the biggest paid contracts. A lot of times it's what a franchise is showing to the players that come here and the commitment to that team building and that culture building. And I think that was a great point, Mike.
Wow, so we've done an hour.
We've done an hour. We can let you out of here. Hey, let's go ahead.
Curtis does this to me every single time. He just lets me talk and doesn't let me figure out what time it is. So,
yeah, Mike, don't feel bad. He does it to everyone. I'm like,
to all of us,
sending him messages. I'm like, Curtis, we got to get him out of here, man. Like, he's staying.
All right, so you know what
one
you
more
got to
question.
do.
One more question.
If you want one more question, here's what I need you to do. I need you to subscribe to the Charlotte Observer. We're running a special. I believe it's $1.99 for your first month and then some. Come join us on the newsletter. That's free. Get a sampling for what we do. By the way, that newsletter is not just links. We give you insight. We'll give you stories you won't get anywhere else. My trademark, 3 things I think are about as informative as you're going to get from an opinion standpoint in this market. The newsletter is my favorite thing that I do. And also you can check out Processing Blue. So that's a podcast I do with Alex Zutlow, who I'm a massive fan of and who is probably going to watch this and, write me a poem or something. I don't know, because I'm singing his praises. But
it'll be a great
join
poem.
us. There's content everywhere and we do not stop. So it's not just about breaking news. It's not just about all that stuff. But I'd also say, Dom, smash Smash like, subscribe. Boom. I don't know what that means. Anyway,
but it's a cool thing to say.
It is. That is a cool. Ricky, you know, cool. So what? You got one more question?
I'll ask this. It was asked in the chat earlier, and just selfishly, I want to know, Mike, when is the next episode of Processing Blue dropping?
Ooh, that's a great. Oh, there you
Killer.
go.
We see that roll getting buttered up right there?
Yeah, we recorded it tonight, or I guess this afternoon. It'll be up Wednesday. Processing Blue is so we're being a little selective during the off season, but typically during the season it runs on Wednesdays. It'll run on Wednesdays unless we do like a breaking news pod or like what we did last week where we did the free agency preview. If you listen to that, you kind of had Milton Williams, Trevon Moehrig, and Bobby Brown on your new edition of free agency. No, nobody liked that one.
We liked it.
Bobby Brown was a new edition anyway.
Yeah, we're just letting you. I thought there was more. You remember when Curtis gave you the opening earlier, and you were sitting there kind of like I was just doing there. I was like, he's gonna bring this home.
I'm tired.
I thought there was a tiny bit. No, it's good though.
But yeah, so it'll be out Wednesday. We'll go through all the free agents. We'll go through all the re-signings. We'll talk about the biggest positions of need, stuff that we didn't necessarily talk about here. A Bryce question. I'll stick around for that, Andre. What do you got?
Let's just ask here. If Bryce comes into the season, right, with the same wide receiver room that he has, let's say they add another veteran or something like that. Sure. A lot of fans want that next step. We saw the way that he finished last season. And he finished it with a very reminiscent wide receiver room than what he's going to come into this season with, right? Sure. Is it fair to expect that same type of play, that level of play that we saw those final few weeks? We took the Kansas City Chiefs and we took the Philadelphia Eagles to the wire. Is that something Panthers fans should expect, or would we be lucky to get that again?
Well, I think those two games are weird because it felt like the Chiefs and the Eagles played down to their competition. If we're being honest, I think the game that was really special was Atlanta. He didn't have his top running back. He didn't really. I mean, he was missing his right guard, his best. They were missing their two best players of the season, J.C. Horn and Robert Hunt. Or their three best players, really. Chuba Hubbard. I mean, and he carried them. Like, he was phenomenal. He made Miles Sanders look good. Like, there were throws in that game that were just phenomenal. Like, that should be the standard. That's the one that you should be like, he overcame everything. And frankly, against Tampa in that blowout, he was the only good part of that team.
Yep.
And so, like, I think here's the thing. If we're being honest with ourselves, I know fans want to rush guys onto the field. He should have never been the week one starter as a rookie. They literally signed the perfect bridge quarterback. I got tons of crap for that when I wrote an article about it. Like, the perfect bridge quarterback. There would be no shame in starting Andy Dalton for 4 games. None. And instead, he got his sit and watch in the middle of his second season, and it was embarrassing for him. It was embarrassing for the organization. And by some twist of fate, he got put in right against against the Broncos, and he looked pretty rough against the Broncos. But the second he got back home and they played the Saints, he looked great. And then they played the Giants, and he led a pretty impressive drive. And throughout the season, I thought he played well. I thought they were losing not because of him. And I think that is, I think that's the crux, right? Like, I think that the final 8 games were a stretch of optimism. It's one thing to hope, and that's what that was. It's another thing to know, and I think that the know has to come very early this season. And I'd say for the Panthers too, you guys have sat through some miserable seasons. They haven't made the playoffs in forever. Your expectation should be 500 or better, trying to make that 7th seed. I'm not saying that they have to make the playoffs, but it shouldn't feel like the season's over after the first 5 games. Your expectation should be that this team can compete throughout the season. Did they make the playoffs necessarily? I don't know. I mean, you should want to be a contender by 2026. But from the most part, the expectation should be raised. And I think you guys have every right to, they got their scholarship year, right? Now it's time for
Mhm.
the expectations. I think everybody involved. You don't bench a quarterback and then bring them back in and then do all these shenanigans. You don't spend the money you did on defense. The Evero wasn't playing with a full deck of cards.
Right.
He's got to deliver now too. Like this is put up or shut up time. They're still kind of on the docket with the Prass regime because of certain financial things, but for the most part, this is crafted in Dave Canales' image and in Dan Morgan's image, and now's the time to ascend into that. Look, they doubled the win total last year, low bar.
Right.
Now it's time to double the win total this year.
Amen. We're going to leave it at that. Mike, we appreciate you coming on for the hour that you spent with us. Thank you so much. We thank everyone in the chat for, contributing throughout the episode. And if you guys would please, we got almost 1,500 people listening right now at almost 11 at night here in North Carolina. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, check out the Charlotte Observer. Subscribe to them. Make sure you are following their free newsletter. And until then, we'll see you guys next week. We'll probably do a mock draft as we're coming up here as we get closer to the draft. But until then, keep pounding.